Hello guys, it's Amanda, and today I'm going to be sharing with you what I read in June. I'm going to be going over this in star order from like lowest to highest, and the first one that I have is Middlegame by Shannon McGuire. Probably very unpopular opinion, but I did not really like this book very much. It was a 2-star for me. This book is basically about, I'm not even sure I can tell you what it's about without like completely giving it away. I can tell you that it has to do with, I don't even know, like, I'm not really sure I could say anything. I know that my last video, okay. The first book that I have to share with you is Middlegame by Shannon McGuire. This was not my favorite book, and that's definitely an unpopular opinion. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I don't really know how to give a plot synopsis without completely giving it away. In my June TBR, I said that it was a thriller, and it is and it isn't, kind of. It's kind of more about this sort of, it's kind of like a thriller where there's like a race to like get to the end almost, but it's, I don't know, like I wouldn't typically think of it as a thriller, maybe thriller mystery maybe, but anyway, this wasn't my favorite. I kind of feel like it was almost too smart for me maybe. I just didn't really understand the hype for it. Maybe I'm missing something, and if I completely miss something, please feel free to like say something down below in the comments, because it just wasn't my favorite. I didn't love it and I didn't hate it, so 2 stars. The next book that I read in June was The Farm by Joanne Ramos. This book is about it's about a woman named Jane. She is a Filipino woman who is just kind of, she needs money, and so she goes to the farm where she becomes like a surrogate mother, and it's just kind of talking about like how that is, and then how when she has a family member that gets sick, whether she should like leave the farm and to go see her family member and then lose out on all the benefits and the money that she would have gotten at the end of like producing a healthy baby, or whether she should stay. But I think that while the story itself wasn't necessarily the most riveting thing, I did enjoy it. I gave it a 3-star, but I really enjoyed the different ideas and like I guess the main concept of it, about how like you have these women who become surrogate mothers, and it's basically a womb for rent, and it just, the switch to seeing these people as people versus an item as a commodity, as something that you can control, was absolutely crazy, where these women would be coming in being like, I want a surrogate mother who is attractive, I want a surrogate mother who has this sort of educational background, who is this sort of, has this sort of heritage, and as if all of that would be absorbed, I guess, by the baby, which it wouldn't be, because I mean it's just a surrogate mother. But the sort of stuff that they had in this book was kind of insane, where you had to sign this contract, you had to like exercise a certain amount, you had to eat a certain amount, like stay within a certain calorie limit, and you really just lost all like control of your body, and I think that it was absolutely insane. So it was definitely very interesting to think about, because I'm sure that like stuff like this happens, and I wonder, I'm not really sure that there's any like surrogate industry, but who knows, there might be, and this was a very interesting book to read, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I have is The City of Mirrors by Cronin. I'm going into like my 4-star range right now, but this is the last book to the Passage trilogy, and it's been such a ride, honestly. The first book, The Passage, I was kind of like, about, it was okay, but it wasn't anything crazy. I wasn't like super duper invested into it. And then the second book ended up being what really had me like coming back for more, because the second book is when things ended up really, really getting interesting, and this third book was just almost like a perfect conclusion. I didn't think that it was absolutely perfect because towards the end, I think I would have liked a more ambiguous ending, but everything like wrapped up pretty well. I really, really love the characters, specifically Anthony Carter. He was just too good for everybody in this book. He was just so misunderstood. This is basically an apocalyptic book about vampires. So if that's something that really interests you, if anyone's into super apocalyptic books, I would recommend this series. I think that it was really, really great, and it was just a fun ride. So this was fun. The next book is Dopesick by Beth Macy. I recently read this book called Heroine by Mindy McGinnis, and that's probably my favorite book that I read so far. And I really didn't know anything about the opioid crisis, so I ended up picking this just to learn more about it. And I definitely feel a lot more educated about the opioid crisis, where it started, how it started in rural Appalachia and how it just kind of spread from there. Just kind of how big pharma was promoting it, and then doctors were overprescribing. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that she has to say, but obviously I don't really have any strong, like, here are my stances, because I think I would really, really like to look at a lot more of the medical research studies that they had done based on buprenorphine, methadone, and the efficacy, the efficacy of how that really, really helps with like withdrawal symptoms from opioids, like whether it really helps to treat it or whether it's just like a good way of getting them off and keeping them off, because I'm not really sure how great it is, because I know that the author said that you could still get like some sort of high off of it. So I don't really know, but that's definitely something that I would be really interested in looking at in the future. But if you're at all curious about the opioid epidemic, I thought that this was a really good book to just kind of really get like a big overall picture of like the big problem. And yeah, this definitely gave me a lot to think about, and I enjoyed it. It's a nonfiction, so it's kind of, if you guys don't like nonfiction, it's kind of a slower read, but I think it was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. Another 4-star that I have is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Okay, so for what this book did, it did really, really well. As a standalone fantasy book, like just one book, it did a really, really good job with having character development kind of, and just having very distinctive characters and having the plot just go through, and it was just really, really good. It really didn't start picking up until around like halfway or about 60% of the way in, but you have to expect that since this is like a standalone fantasy. It takes a really, really long time to just start to like set the baseline, I guess is how you would say it. And it was just really, really great. Basically, this book is a fantasy book about there's different, like there's the West and the East, and then there's the South, and the West is very, very they're kind of like medieval, and they're almost like really, really religious, where they kind of follow this like Knights of Chivalry sort of code, and they absolutely hate dragons of all kinds. Then there's the East, who like the Eastern dragons, and the Eastern dragons are more water-based versus the fire dragons, which they breathe fire. And fire dragons bad, water dragons good. And that's them. And so obviously the West and the East, they just can't really reconcile that. And then the South kind of just has their own thing going on. They're kind of more of like this intermediary between the West and the East, but I would say that they're more closely aligned with the East. I'm going to be having something really cool coming out for this book hopefully sometime this month. So hopefully me saying this gives me accountability so that I have it done by this month, since I'm really lazy and just I need to work on it a little bit more. But keep your eyes out for a video about this book from me, and it should be really, really exciting. I hope that you guys will like it. I'm super excited about it. But anyway, I really recommend this book. I think it's super great. It's a pretty long, chunky book, but if that doesn't intimidate you, if you're a fan of fantasy, I ended up really, really liking this. The only thing that stopped me from me giving it a 5 stars is that I think that there could have been a little bit more character, like definition and more like character, like progression. Is that the right word for it? But I think that it's kind of a hard thing to do in just one book. So for what this did, I think it did a fantastic job. So I definitely recommend picking this up. Ooh, now sorry, my like stack of books fell. Getting into my 5-star reads, I have East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and I absolutely loved this book. This book was just so good, and it's just this beautiful penguin edition. I always kind of feel like a beauty guru, just being like, oh, can you see it? But it's just this beautiful penguin edition, and honestly, it was just an absolutely beautiful story. It's about this like Cain and Abel sort of relationship. It's very biblical almost, and just a lot of this like different things, like passages and stuff really stood out to me. Like something that I'm going to share with you is one of the things that they were talking about is when Cain killed his brother Abel, and then he was cursed by God, and God told him that like you are going to overcome sin, or I think it's like you are going to overcome sin, like as a command, like you will do it, or like, or more of a like you're going to triumph, right? But then one thing that they talked about is that they went into the Jewish, like they looked at the Jewish word for what he was saying, and it was actually you may overcome sin. And there's just so much power in that, and it just like really resonated with me, and probably anybody who's ever read this book, because it's just like you can do it, like you can put in work and you can overcome these obstacles, or you don't have to. Like you have a choice and you have free will over what you do, and that really just made all the difference. And so it was really interesting getting to read this and looking at different characters and being like, wow, this is a Cain sort of character, this is an Abel sort of character, and to really get a look into their different character personalities and who they are, like what their motives are, and it's generational kind of too. I would say like 2 generations, but you kind of see like the parent generation, but it's just absolutely beautiful, and I would really recommend reading this. And finally, the last book that I read in June was Daisy Jones and the Six. So I was kind of nervous about going in to read this because I know that this was super hyped, but it does not disappoint at all. I think that it was absolutely gorgeous. It was written in interview format, and I know that a lot of people said to listen to the Audible version of it, or the audiobook in general, but I didn't really have any problems reading the interview formats. I don't know if you can really see, but I didn't have any issues with it. I thought that this was an absolutely beautiful book. It really gave me that sort of sense of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it was just so fantastic for anybody who doesn't know what this is about, although I don't know how you couldn't have heard about this if you watch book 2. But this is basically about the rise and fall of Daisy Jones and the Six, how they rose to the top of the charts and how it just kind of like collapsed from there. And it's kind of like a where are they now? How are they doing? What did they think about their time together? And it's really interesting. All the characters were like very different. They had their own unique personalities, and it was just so good. It was just so good. I don't really know what else to say about it other than that it was so good. I think that a lot of people, or some people, had problems with the interviewing format because it was very it was very like telling instead of showing. But I kind of felt like I could, from what they were saying, I could almost see what they were, as they were imagining it. And I thought that that was really interesting. And just, it was so cool seeing how their different songs like related to like where they were in their life and how they were feeling, and how it meant one thing for somebody but something completely different from somebody else, and yet still had this sort of like hybrid mix between the two. I don't know. I just thought it was super duper cool, and I really like rock, so I think that this was a super great book to read, and I 100% recommend it, and I can't wait to go pick up more of Taylor Jenkins' books. So that's all the books that I read in June. If you guys have read any of these books, please comment down below, tell me what you guys thought, or just tell me what you read in June, and we can have a conversation down in the comments. And I will see you next time. Bye!